I am Rochelle Ocampo from Makilala TV and the Executive Director of the New York State chapter of the National Federation of Filipino Americans. And I am humbled to be your moderator for today's very important event. I'd like to first acknowledge that March is Women's History Month and to take this moment to honor all of the trailblazing women throughout history. And I encourage each of you to take some time today to read up on an Asian American woman in history, say like Mabel Peng Hua Lee or Corazon Aquino. So definitely.
Or Margaret Chin.
Or Margaret Chin. Thank you, Senator Liu. Yes, please, let's take some time to honor those trailblazing women. So now, on a more serious note, and the reason why we're all here today, to set expectations of what will happen today for the next 2 hours, this dialogue will be between communities, city agencies, and elected officials. It's going to be a part of a long-term movement to make positive change. So the first session is called Asian Voices, and this will include leaders from various Asian communities, while the second session will feature government agencies and elected officials who will share resources and also share responses to some of the questions from the community. Then we will end the event with a question and answer session. So my personal goal for today's event is that we leave here with more than just the hope to collaborate with each other. We are here to also put suggestions into action. Let's hold each other accountable. Let's hold city agencies and elected officials accountable to make this city safer for us all. So the first person, oh, I sound like an elected official there. It sounded like super official. The first person I'd like to invite is Pastor Mike Chan of the Chinese Christian Herald Crusades for his welcome remarks.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the Chinese Christian Herald Crusade, I would like to extend my appreciation to everyone who participated in this forum. I remember on November 2020, for the first time, I shared my deep concerns with Flora Fern of New York City Commission on Human Rights regarding a trend of verbal and physical attacks on Asians shortly after the COVID outbreak, especially toward the Chinese immigrant. That's how the idea of having a community forum was first conceived in my mind. Then throughout the last 4 months, more and more community-based organizations and intergovernment agencies have observed the same trend, that this problem continued to exacerbate, and leading to a wave of assaults against Asian and Pacific immigrants in many cities, including New York, as of this week. So I believe an open dialogue to understand the magnitude of this issue is the first step to seek the final solution. So therefore, I want to thank everybody to build this platform together and allow all the stakeholders in the Asian American immigrant communities to let our voices be heard, to share some of our painful experience and hopefully become agents of advocating for our human rights. I also pray that this forum will foster a hopeful spirit to find common solutions, not just pointing fingers, and forge deeper collaboration with elected officials to crack down on hate crimes. And eventually we establish a true sense of universal brotherhood. We thank you again to our planning committee members, which are many, also our elected officials, and especially every participant in this forum. By attending this event, it shows that you care. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Chan, for that beautiful welcome. It is because of your leadership and perseverance that we have this community forum to raise our voices and, like you said, find common solutions. So now, speaking of solutions, we will spend the next few minutes learning about the context behind why there has been a rise in violence against Asian Americans and possible solutions to address it from our first speaker on the panel, Ms. Karen King, who is the Vice Chair of the Pro Bono and Community Service Committee.
那我们 Karen King 是提供一些免费的法律服务的。
Ms. King?
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for being here and having me participate in this panel discussion.
請我參加。 好似
And I am with the Asian American Bar Association of New York, which is an organization of lawyers in New York who were very concerned with what was happening in our community and with the rise of anti-Asian hate incidents and crimes occurring in the New York area. Albany published a report recently, just a few weeks ago, called A Rising Tide of Hate and Violence Against Asian Americans in New York during COVID-19. And in this report, we walk through some of the observations of the past year, the rise in incidents in New York, the history of anti-Asian hate and sentiment during times of crisis, and also analyze some of the challenges that our community faces, challenges towards trying to find a solution for this very complex and difficult problem, a lot of the differing viewpoints that members of our community have on how to approach the issue. And we do try to offer some concrete solutions, proposals for discussion and possible implementation as a way to not only recognize the problem that we all now face, but also come together and find solutions towards advancing our goals here. So I don't think there's a lot of dispute, and I'm sure everyone here does recognize that there has been
是没有什么争议性。这个反亚裔的歧视的这些暴力呢，是
New York City Commission of Human Rights and other organizations at the start of the pandemic showed a huge spike in the incidents that were being reported of anti-Asian hate crimes and anti-Asian incidents. There's
仇
also
恨
a
犯罪同埋一啲歧視，譬如 NYPD 紐約市
2019 of potential hate crime incidents and complaints. And news outlets have reported that at least 1/3 of Americans have reported witnessing individuals blaming Asians for the outbreak of the pandemic. In terms of the types of incidents, of course, there are the really atrocious incidents of physical violence, stabbing, setting people on fire, beating victims up, and other acts of true aggression. There's also a wide range of incidents of harassment, name calling, shunning, coughing on people, and making really derogatory remarks. And I think in New York, because of the high degree of public space and public transportation, you see a greater incidence of this because of the usage of the subway systems or buses, and just sidewalks in general playing such a huge part of our sort of community experience. This is particularly difficult for Asian Americans because not only are the incidents atrocious, but Asian Americans are also bearing a huge burden of the pandemic. Despite being about 6% of the population, Asian Americans are a higher portion of the essential healthcare workforce.
亞裔人士咧係屬於做呢個醫療嘅工作啦，譬如喺紐約市咧好多係亞裔人士。
By Asian Americans of small businesses, which are obviously heavily affected by the pandemic, including the restaurant business and the small shops. And so unemployment among Asians is a higher percentage than the regular percentage representation in the population. And so all of this, plus the anti-Asian sentiment, I think has really caused a huge burden and a huge problem in our communities. And the challenges that we face in trying to address this problem are a history in this country of hatred and violence rising in times of fear and uncertainty. This has happened multiple times before. This is not a new phenomenon. And so we have this history and historical burden that is carried forward in this latest pandemic. There's also, as I'm sure everyone knows, a lot of inaccurate and incomplete information being perpetuated during the pandemic, starting with, of course, the Trump administration calling it the China virus, and the sort of international political sort of political dialogue and political blaming that happened under that administration. We all can recognize that the numbers of incidents being reported is only going to be a very small portion of what is actually happening. There is certainly underreporting happening within the community of some of these incidents. But what is, I think, even more frustrating and one of our greatest challenges here is that those incidents that are reported are met with inaction, or we don't see consequences happening. Perpetrators are not being punished for some of these incidents. And that causes a cycle of underreporting because you don't think that reporting has any effect. The burdens of reporting are quite heavy. And when you don't see results, people telling you to report, it becomes kind of a chicken and egg problem that's affecting both the numbers and also the effectiveness of reporting. There, in general, I think, has been frustration in the community over the very few numbers of hate crimes being charged and also prosecutions of hate crimes. There's a perception that hate crimes against Asians are not taken as seriously as hate crimes against other minority groups, and a general frustration with the legal standards that are used to defend the lack of charges and prosecutions of hate crimes. And why is it that there isn't a presumption that in a time of pandemic where there is a lot of anti-Asian hate sentiment going around, that it cannot be presumed that an attack of an Asian American isn't a hate crime. And so there's a dialogue there about the legal standards and where you can draw from context to try to satisfy some of the elements of a hate crime. And of course, one of the biggest challenges is also some of the social and political tensions and issues among minority groups as we struggle to honor victim rights, but also respect the need for criminal justice reform and the lack of fairness in our criminal justice system at times.
那我们也有，我们在我们的亚裔社群呢，也有不同的声音是怎么样解决这个问题。
처벌하지 않고 넘어가는 문화가 있거든요. 여러 가지 저희가 고쳐야 될 것들이 많이 있습니다. 물론
更加多嘅反應咧，我哋更加關注我哋呢啲民選議員咧都要幫手關
police attention, more protection, more representation of police in our communities, more activity and support for the Asian Hate Crimes Task Force. And then there are others in the community who are frustrated by government action and the police actions thus far and are calling for reform, are calling for defunding and alternative ways to address the problem. And as I said before, the tension between victim rights and criminal justice reform really hangs large. And that's something I think from a legal perspective, from a lawyers organization, that's something that we are struggling to try to find resolution and solutions for. And in general, cooperation among minority groups is something that I think we are all pushing for. Because there are, particularly in the New York area, such a diverse community, both in terms of victims' rights as well as criminal justice reform. The cooperation among minority groups is something that I think will be very important as we try to find solutions, long-term solutions that have a broad base of support within the broader community. So in Ebony's report, we do offer a few initiatives for discussion. And so I just tee them up here so that we can be informed as we move forward with today's discussion. One of the things that, yes?
All right, thank you, Karen. I just wanted to be mindful of the time and just to wrap up with some of your last talking points. I know you're just about to go to the main meat of it, but if you have any closing remarks, yes.
Yeah, quickly, and apologies for the time. I know we're a little short, but in terms of proposed initiatives, one, clear reporting mechanisms for victims, online reporting, just streamlined reporting, having uniform and consistent classification and prosecution of hate crimes by law enforcement, greater representation by Asians in law enforcement, public office, and the courts, public education campaign, which has been effective in other issues and initiatives, stronger unity and collaboration among minority groups, as I mentioned, legislative reform, changing the laws to the extent they've been challenges in getting results, and lastly, civil actions as an alternative to criminal prosecutions. Those types of initiatives, I think, are concrete things that we as a community can push for to try to resolve this problem.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Karen, for that insightful summary of Abiney's white paper. Again, the link to that paper should be in the chat. And if it's not, I believe I saw it earlier, but please repost it so that others can see and access the paper. And I urge you all to read through it and see which parts resonates with you. And let's push for it to our city agencies and elected officials. Now, for our second organization, we welcome back Pastor Mike Chan from the Chinese Christian Herald Crusades. Pastor Mike?
Yeah, I represent the Chinese Christian Herald Crusade in New York headquarters. First of all, I'd like to express our sympathy toward all the victims of hate crimes against Asians. We are a not-for-profit Christian organization providing comprehensive services to the Chinese immigrant families in New York for the last 38 years. I personally immigrated to the US over 40-some years. So America is my home and my country. I love it. But at this time, my heart feels saddened by the current situation when I see the so-called Asian model minority suddenly become a target of hate crimes in the midst of the pandemic. That's totally, unacceptable. But since I listened to the American Bar Association report, I read it myself.
但是不知道为什么突然是成為
詳細有40幾頁，非常之感謝佢哋做咗好多
historical context, supported by documented cases. So I'm not going to expound any.
여러 가지 문서를 보고 이게 왜 나쁜 건지를 저희가 뭐 여러분께 설명드리지 않아도 형분들 특정 인종을 찍어서 형분대로 하면 안 되는 건 아시겠지만 저희가 이거를 대처하는 입장에서 그 단체 지도자로서 코로나 상황을 어떻게 해결해야 되는지 분명히
enough public education to inform and raise awareness among the Asian communities about hate crimes. Or at least personally, I don't see there are too many action toward that. I currently keep in touch with the city closely, especially the Commission on Human Rights. I hope that in the future we can do more educational workshops and just to spread the word out and tell people how and what is hate crime. So we need to, in general, have a very good understanding of this particular subject. Second question, why is it so hard to prosecute a hate crime? As mentioned before, I think perhaps the complicated process or lack of concrete results discourages victims to file a police report. So what is the remedy to this situation? So can enforcement agency actually can streamline the process and make the report procedure more centralized and easier? Because sometimes when a crime victim, they have to go through the hoops and contact this agency, another agency, and there's so many complicated questions. And without knowing the definition of hate crime, they simply just do not know how to phrase the kind of experience they have. So this, I think that we can do something about it. Thirdly, does the legislative effort include some provisions that would enhance penalty, like stiffer prison sentence, if someone were convicted of a hate crime, so that it would act as a strong deterrent? So I don't know at this time, how strong or how severe the penalty is, or simply just a pat on the back, or not a pat on the back, but just kind of very light, just a verbal admonishment, or very light misdemeanor conviction, or sometimes if it's convicted, it should be prosecuted to the highest extent. Number 4, would government agencies consider forming a task group to interface with law enforcement to help victims? What I mean, a task group consists of community partnerships, civic and faith-based organizations to make recommendations, assess progress, and make a report to the local authorities on this issue on a periodical basis. So I'm looking forward to learning from other community representatives and hope that today we can achieve common ground across ethnic boundaries. So let us work together to promote social harmony and create an environment free of hostility, bias, mistrust, and injustice. Just let us practice love thy neighbor as thyself. So that's my statement. Thank you and God bless.
Wow, Pastor Mike, that was so well said. Thank you for reaffirming the importance of this type of forum and bringing up that suggestion of creating that certain task force of Asian American leaders so that we can focus on finding common solutions across communities. So I'd like to now take this time to remind everyone that there are interpreter options. If you need Mandarin, Cantonese, or Korean interpretation, you may enter breakout rooms with that language if you click on the globe icon in the bottom of your screen. And we'll have the Chinese and Korean interpreters to say that verbally as well.
再次喺度提醒大家，新加入嚟嘅群眾喺網上面，你哋睇個銀幕最下邊右手邊咧有個地球儀。如果你係需要中文嘅翻譯嘅話咧，有兩個選擇，你可以選擇 Chinese 就可以得到國語嘅翻譯。如果你選擇 CART 就可以得到粵語嘅翻譯。同時我哋都有韓語嘅翻譯。以下請國語嘅人員介紹一下。
再次跟大家提醒一下，如果说你需要国语的翻译，请在那个世界的图案，在你的视频的最右下角有一个翻译的图案，地球的图案，你可以点广东话，你可以选广东话或者是国语。如果是有听韩语的，也可以选韩语，你们可以在那里换。Korean next.
네, 지금 언어 통역 사용법을 알려드리겠습니다. 한국어 통역이 필요하신 분들은 화면 맨 아래에 지구 같은 동그란 모양이 있어요. 그 지구 모양을 클릭하시면 오디오 언어를 선택할 수 있어요. 그래서 그 맨 아래에 지구 같은 모양을 클릭하시면 그 다음에 Korean 한국어 클릭하면 돼요. 감사합니다.
Thank you. And now I am pleased to introduce the Executive Director of Indochina Sino-American Community Center, Mr. David Ewing, who will share a testimony from one of his staff members. Mr. David?
I'd like to introduce myself. We are the Indochina Sino-American Community Center, 美東粵緬寮華僑社區中心. Actually, our organization is helping New York area for different new immigrants, peoples that need help and with different programs. And what we testify today, I would like to introduce my staff, and she actually is probably on the panel, and she probably speaks Cantonese, and her name is Karine. Is she there? Hi, Karine. Hello. She probably is the assault incidents case that she'd like to share with us on one of the incidents that happened on August 7, 2000. And at that time, after she works from the office, and she left the office around 5:15, and she crossed the street at the intersection of our area, which is the Forsyth Street and Rivington. And she received a call, and she answered the call while an unknown Black female dressed like a homeless and ran over and punched her face. caused a pain and redness and a pain to the nose. At that time, a truck driver and a pedestrian passed by and saw the incidents. And the pedestrian was a Black young man and also cared about the situation and asked if he can help. And she answered that she was fine and then left. And she reported to us on the following Monday, which is August 10th, 2000 in the morning. Then I suggest she needs to inform the police at the local precinct, which is 5th precinct. Local police officer Chan came to inquire about the situation and respond to this assault incident. The complaint number was 2770. Thank you for your concern and attention to this matter. If she's on the line, she probably can speak in Cantonese to address all the incidents. But if she's not, and I just report it in English. Thank you.
Karine, are you on the line? I just want to make sure before we.
Yes, I'm here. Yeah. 各位先生女士，你哋好。我用中文講，希望你哋聽到。Yes， 我楊主任咧係我嘅上司，咁佢都鼓勵我去對呢件事咧去報案，所以咧喺之後發生咗事3日之後，我就去第5區嘅警察局嗰度報案，喺 Chinatown 嗰邊。Yes。我都希望話區長呢個區嘅區長或者係管理我哋呢幾個區嘅，希望大家咧就可以注意我哋嗰邊嘅環境啊，即係我哋多數都受襲擊嘅，因為嗰度咧嗰啲可能同埋嗰啲無家可歸啲人太多，變成我哋嘅治安咧唔係幾好，我哋速日工作咧非常之擔心。尤其是冬天天時比較快黑暗啲咧，我哋放工嘅情況咧都好緊張，所以呢啲你就希望區長方面就或者係市區政府都多多注意呢咁嘅區，保持我哋嘅安全。多謝大家。
So thank you, David and Karine, for sharing that scary incident. And one good thing that happened that I heard from there is that some people stopped to check up on her. And I hope that is something that more people will be doing if they see someone being harassed or hurt, that they do step up and offer their help. I'm hoping that we can have representatives from maybe the NYPD later on during the question and answer portion to see if there's been any updates on that incident. So thank you again for sharing.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So so now as the executive director of the New York State chapter of the National Federation of Filipino Americans, our group focuses on promoting the active participation of Filipino Americans in civic and national affairs. So on behalf of the Filipino American community, I wanted to address a recent incident involving a Phil-Am immigrant, Noel Quintana, who from Queens was taking the train to one of his 2 jobs when he was brutally attacked, his face slashed from ear to ear. And it was personal to the Asian community, and it felt like all of us immigrants were assaulted as well. What was more disturbing was that no one came to help. And as a New Yorker, I believe we can do better. We need to do better. If you see someone getting harassed or hurt, you can step up and be an upstander, not a bystander. So I personally read up on resources to see how I can be an upstander. And I found that there were self-defense and upstander trainings offered for free by the Center for Anti-Violence Education and by the Center for Anti-Violence Education group. So I urge you to see them as a resource. They offer great trainings. And there's also anti-hate safety resources by the Asian American Federation that you can also look up. For the few moments that I have with you, I wanted to just share 3 suggestions that I have for city agency and elected officials. The first one, and I've shared this earlier at another group, New York City should host targeted press conferences prioritizing
应该要举行这样的会议，就是新闻会议来帮助
information about resources in the languages that the community understands. Number 2, we should seriously consider the recommendations from the Asian American Bar Association of New York paper. They've collected the data, they've done the research. We really should look into their concrete examples of how we can keep Asian Americans safe. And my third suggestion is to continue hosting and partnering with community-based organizations to do more trainings. And like what Pastor Mike said, education. We need more education sessions
我们需要
out
更
there
多
on
的
the
教
ground
育
in
部
languages
分
that the
在那
community
里，就
speaks,
是
so that we
帮
can
助
feel
我
more
们说不
empowered to
同语
take
言的
action
团体，我
when
们可以
we
来
see
加
someone
强
getting
他
harassed or
们，
hurt.
当他们
So I'd like to introduce our last speaker on the panel, President Alexandra Lee, who is representing OCA New York, which promotes and protects the political, economic, and cultural rights of AAPIs in the United States since 1973. So Ms. Lee, please share with us more about OCA New York.
Hi, yes, good afternoon. On behalf of OCA New York, I'd like to thank Pastor Mike and the Chinese Christian Herald Crusades, the New York City Commission on Human Rights, MOIA, the NYPD Asian Hate Crimes Task Force, and the Office for Prevention of Hate Crimes for this particular opportunity to discuss the COVID pandemic's impact on the Asian American community, and in particular, the increase of hate crimes against the Asian American community in New York City. So as you mentioned, OCA, Asian Pacific American Advocates, is a national nonprofit civil rights organization that works to promote and protect the political, economic, and cultural rights of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in the United States. It was founded in 1973, and the organization has grown to over 50 chapters and affiliates around the country, working with organizational partners and members on policy issues affecting the AAPI community, such as immigration, racial equality, inclusion, and civic engagement. One of the New York chapter's signature events is a hate crimes prevention art project, now in its 15th year. The art project works with high school youth, providing education and training while using art as a tool to prevent hate crimes. The goal in that project is to engage and empower youth to become advocates for the community in the future. Since the start of the pandemic, hate crimes against Asian Americans has increased at an alarming rate. This includes racially motivated assault, harassment, and attacks that have resulted in death. The organization Stop AAPI Hate has reported approximately 3,000 hate incidents against Asian Americans since the start of the pandemic. New York City has seen an 800% increase of hate incidents during the past year. The racialized language of former President Trump has stoked the flames of racism, xenophobia, and intolerance against the AAPI community, and has prompted many to blame Asian Americans for COVID. While we applaud President Biden's executive order banning this type of rhetoric, much more needs to be done. Many believe that the actual number of hate incidents is much higher. As part of Asian culture, it is not common to speak up, to speak out, or to call attention to oneself. Folks in the AAPI community fear law enforcement. They are worried about their immigration status, and there are language barriers. These issues help to contribute to the underreporting of hate incidents. As an Asian American woman, I feel especially vulnerable. I have felt concerned for my own personal safety. I've calculated my actions to avoid being out at certain times and to going to certain places. I'm concerned for my elderly family members. I've also asked them to assess their actions and activities. We appreciate the city's efforts in establishing the Asian Hate Crimes Task Force, the Anti-Discrimination Online Toolkit, and the Office for Preventing Hate Crimes. We urge the city and appropriate agencies to address the issue of language access and cultural competency to encourage victims to come forward and report hate crimes. As an immigration advocate, I've seen firsthand the fear that immigrant communities have in reporting crime, interacting with law enforcement, and advocating for themselves. Again, that's language barriers, cultural competency, fear regarding their immigration status, and sort of fear of authority in general, law enforcement. And yes, we can do better, and more needs to be done. We also asked that the NYPD Asian Hate Crimes Task Force be a permanent agency with city budget support. An unfunded and volunteer force is sure to be met with challenges in its efficacy. OCA New York looks forward to working with our electeds, law enforcement, and community partners in these efforts. And I thank you for the time and look forward to collaborating in the future.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Lee, for sharing all the sentiments from OCA New York. I think it's definitely true. Everyone is aware of the barriers, language, cultural competence, the fear of law and distrust of law enforcement. I see that and I understand that, and I'm hoping that we can address that, not just today, but just keep it in conversation and keep the movement going. So with that said, that is the closing of our first session of Asian American leaders in our community. I would like to now go towards our government agencies and elected officials and their responses, and hopefully some resources that they can offer our community. So our first speaker in this second session will be Deputy Commissioner of Law Enforcement Bureau, Sapna Raj, within the New York City Commission on Human Rights.
Thank you, Rochelle. Good afternoon, everyone. I am the Deputy Commissioner who heads the Law Enforcement Bureau at the New York City Commission on Human Rights. With the troubling increase in anti-Asian incidents in New York City in the last year, we want to make sure that every New Yorker understands that there is a civil law in New York City that gives them very comprehensive protections. The New York City Human Rights Commission came into existence many decades ago to make sure that New Yorkers have the right not to be discriminated against because they belong to a particular race, religion, national origin, etc. That is called a protected class. And we, as people who live in, work in, or use services such as stores or public transportation, doctors' offices, etc. in New York City, have 26 different protected classes under our law that we may belong to and cannot be discriminated against because we are part of one of those protected classes. The New York City Commission on Human Rights also educates New Yorkers about their rights by holding trainings in our law, working with communities to educate them about their rights in New York City, and reaching out to individuals or communities in New York City that have faced discrimination. At the Commission, we speak 30 languages, including Mandarin, Cantonese, Taiwanese, Fujianese, Hakkanese, and Korean. If at the Commission, we don't speak the language of the person who's calling us or contacts our office, we use interpreter services such as a language line to translate and assist the public. Most importantly, when you contact the Commission or file a complaint, we do not ask about your immigration status. Your immigration status is not something you're asked to disclose at any point when receiving services from the Commission. Again, the human rights law itself is a civil, not a criminal law. And that means that there has to be some relationship between the person who discriminates and the person being discriminated against. If you have been treated differently by someone you had a relationship with, for example, your landlord, your real estate broker, or your employer, or a store owner where you shop, because of your race, national origin, immigration status, or the other 26 protected classes, you may be able to file a complaint with us and we will investigate, and you may be able to get money damages for the discrimination you were harmed by. We at the Commission understand that when one person is discriminated against or treated differently because of who they are, it is not only that person who is harmed, it is the larger community. So how can that larger harm be addressed? Many times we use what we call restorative justice, which can include something like an apology, training on our law, having that person work in some way with the very groups they discriminated against, or having the commission monitor them. That is, have them report to the commission on a regular basis how they have corrected their actions and policies. Our law also provides, when I say our law, it actually is a law for all us New York City residents and people who even are just visiting New York City. The law provides that a business or a person who has been found to violate the human rights law may also have to pay fines to the city, that is penalties of up to $250,000 in addition to what they may have to pay the individual. When you report discrimination to the commission, you can come forward and file a complaint if we speak with you and determine there has been a discrimination, or it can be reported anonymously. So you don't have to give us your name or contact information. You can just leave information about the incident, who was discriminating against someone else, and the address and details about that person or business. Or you can give us information and be ready to speak with us, but say that you don't want to file a complaint, but you'd like the commission to look into it. So there are different ways of coming forward and contacting us. The Community Relations Bureau of the Commission does a lot of work in the communities, as you all know, in New York City. With the Center for Anti-Violence Education, they hosted 11 bystander intervention trainings, reaching thousands of New Yorkers who are now committed to supporting Asian and Pacific Islanders facing harassment and discrimination. That means that if a New Yorker sees that a discriminatory act is taking place, they now know what they can do to stop it or report it. These bystander intervention trainings have been offered in English, Mandarin, and Korean. You may ask, what does this mean, or what does this look like? As I mentioned, you can let the commission know about the discrimination you see, but not necessarily experience yourself. So, for example, recently, 2 people reported to the commission that while they were waiting to be served at a business, they saw 2 Asian people being told to speak in English and come back with a translator, even though they were speaking in English, if they wanted to be served. The commission started an investigation of that business. That investigation can be done in many ways. We want to make sure that everyone who comes to that business, which serves many immigrant communities, does not treat their clients differently just because of their race or national origin. So in this instance, it was not the family that had been discriminated against who came forward and reported it to us and contacted us. It was a bystander who was waiting for service from that same business. The Community Relations Bureau has conducted 5 bias and hate crimes reporting town halls in English, Japanese, Chinese, Tagalog, and Korean to let New Yorkers know how to report such incidents, bias incidents, and hate crimes. When the COVID crisis started early last year, we recognized that we needed to respond to the needs of New Yorkers quickly and promptly. So we put together a COVID response team, which took almost 200 actions on COVID-related incidents of discrimination over the last year. We, as you know, are a very small New York City agency that is tasked with a very big job, addressing the many ways in which we New Yorkers face discrimination every day, whether it's in housing, employment, or when we use public accommodations. Of course, with the budget crisis, our job has become much more challenging. Last, I just wanted to talk about other ways in which the Commission has participated in the process of making New York City a more inclusive society. We have been part of the I Still Believe in New York City public awareness campaign, which has brought awareness to the social and economic impact of COVID-19 on Asian New Yorkers through art, which can be seen at the Atlantic Avenue Barclays Center terminal, at different installations like the Link and NYC kiosks, and in bus shelters throughout New York City, and a mural in Manhattan's Chinatown we will be unveiling that in the spring. The information about how to contact us is on the screen, and we encourage you to contact us if you or someone in your community is facing discrimination. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you so much, Deputy Commissioner Sapna. That was such important information that you shared, not just about the resources, but action, things that your commission has been doing, including some of the examples of the reports that have been shared. So thank you so much for giving those resources to us. The second guest that I'd like to introduce on behalf of the New York City Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, we have Deputy Commissioner and General Counsel J. Carolina Chavez.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to start off by saying thank you for having us on this panel with so many different community leaders and advocates, as well as our colleagues at the city and other elected officials. We want to echo what CCHR just talked about just a couple of minutes ago about the importance of sticking together as New Yorkers, because we recognize that any attack on any of us, and right now our Asian American neighbors and colleagues and friends, is an attack on all New Yorkers. And so we echo that sentiment and also appreciate the information that they just gave us. A small agency, but I would say a fierce one. So it's always good to have you on our side. So I also wanted to go ahead and, sorry, 1 second. I think we wanted to, I guess, name kind of some of the things that have been talked about, and I won't be too long because I know we're a little bit short on time. But first off, that the city and Moya has always recognized that COVID-19 is a public health issue. It's something that needs to be addressed by everyone in the city as a public health issue, and it is not something that is related to race or ethnicity or immigrants exclusively. We also recognize that Asian Americans are, as has been described already, the members of the essential workers that we have relied on in the city. There are doctors, our nurses, pharmacists, food delivery people, as well as our friends and colleagues and neighbors, as mentioned before. So for that reason, Moya has really focused its efforts throughout the pandemic, and now in light of the uptick that not only have we seen throughout the pandemic, but has been especially reported on in the last couple of months in bias incidents and hate crimes against the Asian community. Through those efforts, a few of the things that we've done, we have partnered with community-based organizations, some of which are represented on this panel today and maybe in attendance, to conduct town halls in many different languages. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that has looked like a little bit later. But as recently as on March 3rd, we held a Korean language vaccine town hall to disseminate information in Korean to the community, and worked on efforts to provide outreach about that town hall that was taking place. We've also engaged in listening sessions and talking to the community. As recently as on February 25th, the Commissioner Mostofi was on a call with members of the Asian American and Pacific Islanders community to really get a sense of many of the things that you were saying today, and also talk a little bit about the white paper that has already been mentioned that was provided in terms of statistics and recommendations that the city should hear out. On a regular basis, we conduct Know Your Rights campaigns or presentations to members of the Asian American community. Throughout the pandemic, we also participated in PPE distribution as needed, and continue to use our multilingual staff to ensure that we are disseminating information in the languages that people need to hear it in, not just in English. I know that I've been paying attention to the chat as we've been on this presentation, and I know that there have been several comments talking about language access and the importance of it. That is something that Moya has long recognized, and we appreciate hearing what you're seeing in the community. I've been writing notes while we've been having those comments come through. But for awareness, the outreach that we conduct on a regular basis is conducted in Mandarin, Cantonese, Korean, Tibetan, Nepali, Bangla, Arabic, Urdu, and those are just some of the languages that someone kindly typed out for me, so I would make sure to hit them all. So we also, on a regular basis, use our social media networks and also connect with community and ethnic media to provide information, critical information that regarding the pandemic, as well as resources. And we're committed to continuing to partner with the Asian American Pacific Islander community in the city, so that we can continue to address this problem that brought us all together here, in a way that shows that we are united, that we support the community as the city. And I think we actually we can put on the chat, if it's not already in the summary of resources, there are a couple of resources that we wanted everyone to be aware of. First, we have the Moya hotline, which is open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. It's 212-788-7654. And we also have email askmoya@cityhall.nyc.gov, where we can also provide information and receive emails in any language. Eileen, am I forgetting anything by way of resources? I just want to make sure, trying to cram things in.
No, I think you're good. I think the hotline is really the first sort of line of contact for anyone interested in learning more about city services or wanting to connect. We've gotten a number of calls through our hotline with questions about how to make a report of discrimination or anti-bias report, and we've connected them either to CCHR or have helped them fill out the form or talk to folks at CCHR to ensure that their complaint is being filed, and making sure that we're connecting them to language services in order to do that if they don't speak English. And so that's really a good sort of central point of connecting with our office for anything and everything related to city available resources.
So thank you very much for having us again, and we look forward to continuing to work together.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Chavez, for joining us today and sharing all your resources. So this message is for all the attendees and the media that's here for, on this forum. We also have the responsibility to make sure that all of these resources that the Commission of Human Rights that Moya has shared with us are known to the hard-reached communities that we represent. It's a two-way relationship. We really need to make sure that we go out there to make sure that these resources are known. So thank you again for Moya and the Commission of Human Rights. I'd like to now bring the screen to the Office for the Prevention of Hate Crimes with Eunice Lee.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Firstly, thank you again for the powerful voices and testimony before me, including Koreans and Noel Quintana's. I think Pastor Chan really started us off beautifully by saying, by attending, you care. And I want to thank everyone who's here on a pretty sunny, beautiful Saturday afternoon because you care. And that includes our organizers, our elected officials, community leaders, interpreters, and fellow agencies who are here to really think through how we can better respond to and prevent hate crimes holistically, right, as a city, in the immediate urgency of this moment and also in the long term. So my name is Eunice Lee. I'm here with the City Office for the Prevention of Hate Crimes. And if we haven't met with you before, which hopefully we have or we will, I'm going to begin with a bit of background about our office and our role. So the mayor launched our office in September 2019 after appointing our executive director, Deborah Lauder. Our office has an approach that we summarize in 3 key areas, and that is education, community relations, and laws and law enforcement. And as the name Office for the Prevention of Hate Crimes suggests, we're the coordinating office focused on hate crime prevention for the city. So we work with pretty much all the city agencies that are present here today, as well as additional agencies for a total of around 18 city agencies and all 5 district attorneys' offices. We also work with various community organizations doing grassroots work to really support the vulnerable communities in New York. Several representatives are also here today. So while I wish I could go and speak about all of our initiatives, I'm just going to highlight those 2 to really highlight our role in coordinating throughout the city. And I'm also going to talk about just a few of our resources that we have available. And I want to begin with our website, which has a bit more information on these 2 coordinating networks that I just mentioned, and that is at nyc.gov/stophate. And the second is a very new resource, actually. It's not even up on our website yet, but we wanted to share it with you today. And our wonderful partners at Moya are currently translating this resource. But this is just a 2-pager with very concrete examples and scenarios. For instance, let's say I'm in a public space, someone is physically threatening me or harassing me. What can I do? Who can I call? Where can I get support? So this is our 2-pager. We do have a link to it, and it's going to be translated and up on our website very soon. And the next one is just a general link to more of our COVID-19 related resources. So these are more around for communities impacted by anti-Asian and anti-COVID discrimination. And one that we just wanted to pull out from that part of our website is this fact sheet on hate and bias incidents. So we also included a picture, and it is on the top right, that little black rectangle. And this is currently translated into multiple languages, a few that we've noted on this slide. And this resource is just one page and has the basics and the information that you need to know in terms of what is a hate crime, what is what we call a bias incident, what do I mean when I say that, and as well as telephone numbers and other links to support, including mental health supports. And this last one is our Victim Services Finder. So our office is part of the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, and this is something really great that they worked on a few years ago and released, and we're working internally now to really expand this. We also included another picture that's hopefully helpful. It's on the bottom right, that little map with several little circles. So this Victim Services Finder is actually also available in multiple languages, and you can search different community organizations and filter them by language that they offer, services provided, supports for different types of crime, and also by age and location. So again, we're building this out currently, and we're hoping to have more of our partners on this Victim Services Finder, but it could be a good resource for you and your organizations if you want to check this out. And I just wanted to end off by saying, we're all here because we know of the tremendous impact that these types of crimes and incidents have, not only on individuals, but all community members, right? So we want to remind everyone to please just connect with someone, right? Please report incidents to community partners that you trust, when comfortable, to law enforcement. So we really want to make sure that people are being connected to resources and supports that we need. And if you have any further questions or suggestions, or just want to follow up on anything that I've said today or anything that you see on our website, you can email us at ophc@cityhall.gov. And I'm going to be sharing all of these, as well as that email address and my email address, in the chat very shortly. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Eunice. I am actually really excited to see that Victim Services Finder. I want to check it out after this event and see what kind of information is there. And I'm glad that it's in different languages. If there is an organization or service that is not listed there, how do we make sure that we get that there?
Yes, that's a great question. I'm going to put my contact in the chat. You can reach out to us directly, and we'll do everything we can to make this a bit more comprehensive and holistic. Thanks.
Great, good to know. And I am now honored to have Queens District Attorney Melinda Katz join us. Ms. Katz, are you on the line?
Ms. Rochelle, how are you?
Yes, hi.
Thank you for having me. First of all, to everybody who is involved in today's forum, we really appreciate the work that you are doing with the Asian community, but also from the communities throughout the city of New York. Reverend Mike, thank you very much for hosting and being such a large part of this, and using the platform, that the Chinese Christian Herald Center has to bring me and other people together to talk about, well, I'm going to talk a little bit about hate crimes. I also have on the call today, Michael Brovner. I think he is in. He is the chair of hate crimes. When I became the district attorney, which by the way was a year and 2 months ago, 2 months into COVID, by the way, or 2.5 months into COVID, we formed a new bureau for hate crimes. Hate crimes and gang violence used to be in the same bureau. And as many of you know, they are different crimes, different victims, different defendants, and really different investigations. And Michael Brovner has been amazing at heading up the Hate Crimes Bureau. I do see representatives and heard a lot from the representatives from the city's Commission on Human Rights and the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs as well. I see Congresswoman Meng there always. I feel like there's 5 of her in the world because she is everywhere. And who was so brave herself, during the attacks in the Capitol several weeks ago. It really is amazing, Congresswoman, everything you've done and been through. Councilmember Chin, nice to see you. Greetings from Queens to Manhattan. Look, we're all here because incidents must stop, right? And the climate creating fear and hatred, it has to be challenged and it has to be changed. And look, even before COVID-19, we saw the crimes targeting Asian Americans were increasing. And we know that here in New York City, the number of crimes targeting the Asian community has increased from the previous year. And nationally, the number of anti-Asian hate crimes have trended up over the last 5 years. COVID misinformation, existing prejudice has been a toxic mix that has exploded into the incidents and hate crimes we've all been dismayed to see occur. You know, especially in Queens County, where we are, you know, as everyone here on the call has probably heard me say, where we are 190 countries and 200 languages. You know, our diversity here is our strength. It's what we're proud of. It's what makes Queens the best borough in the entire country. Is our diversity. But these incidents that have happened, they are a call to action. And with our attention and our actions squarely focused, I think we can combat the trend and work together to stop them. But we need your help. We need your help to report crimes, especially hate crimes, whenever you see them. You know, hate crimes are so terrible because they don't just affect the victim and their target. Hate crimes have an impact because they are intended to make a statement. They are indeed intended to make a statement throughout the entire community. And the crime cripples and hurts the victim's entire community, causing fear and a sense of alienation that impacts the victim, their community, even other minority groups in the entire community, because people want to see what the reaction is, and they want to see if everyone stands together, and they want to see if we truly are in this as one. I know we're all suffering when we think about these events when they happen in Queens. And we all share in it. And that's not who we are, and it's not what Queens is about. We do not want the diverse communities that we represent to be in danger, to be victims of copycat crimes, to separate us. And we need you all to report these crimes. When you report a hate crime in progress, the chance of the perpetrator being caught is vastly increased. And that means that the police can gather evidence, that evidence can be so time sensitive. And police need to gather it extremely quickly. Things like surveillance videos, cell phone records, witness accounts, they're all extremely important. And they're all extremely important as fast as they possibly can be reported. And anyone, by the way, can report a crime. The police will not ask about your immigration status. We will not ask about it. We want to protect everyone in the borough, documented, undocumented, whatever it is. We are there for the community. It's never asked, never part of the investigation. We just want you to be protected. And I think that's extremely important. And I want, Michael Brobner is here in case there's any specific issues, but I'd like him, if you can, to put, or link Elizabeth, you're on this call as well. Elizabeth is from my office. If you can put the hate crimes hotline number in the chat, that would be extremely helpful. During the first 100 days of my administration, like I said before, I created the Hate Crimes Bureau. It's focused exclusively on investigating allegations of hate, exclusively on motivation by hate crimes and prosecuting the perpetrators. Michael and his team work very closely with the NYPD Hate Crimes Task Force to help gather that important evidence and vigorously pursue any prosecution. We're also engaged in community outreach to keep those vital lines of communication open. And let me just, go off script for a moment. Even if something is not defined by a hate crime according to the law, it's still a crime of violence. And we will prosecute them as rigorously as the law will allow. And so I just wanted to make sure that I was here today for this discussion. It has been an interesting first year of my administration. Bail laws changed twice, discovery laws changed twice. We got rid of very onerous policies in the Queens District Attorney's Office. I created bureaus that never existed before, like human trafficking bureaus, where we have investigated and prosecuted those that take advantage of especially the young and the vulnerable, and they traffic them in the communities, they keep the money, they force them into sex work. and we have been extremely vigorous in prosecuting human traffickers. And so, there's a lot that has gone into this year. For those of you I've known for a long time, I can only say this, 2.5 months that I came into this administration, COVID hit. The office shut down, we went totally virtual, then we came back, then we went back to virtual, then we came back. So it has been an amazing time, but it's been an amazing time for everyone. It's everyone that is working and trying to earn a living while still taking care of their grandparents and their parents and their children and their neighbors and their friends, and stay healthy. It's been a challenging time, but I'm very proud of the work that my office has done in the meantime. And while we were trying just to get through this very, very strenuous time for a lot of families. So I thank you for having me here today. I'm happy to answer questions. Michael, you want to say anything, or I don't know if the hosts want him to? It's up to you.
Yeah, we can have a question and answers towards the end, and we will be able to get some of the responses from the chat box as well that were directed to your office. But yes, thank you so much for your remarks, District Attorney Katz. And I just wanted to say again, what you shared earlier, our diversity is our strength. Let's use that to our advantage and overcome these adversities in our community. So thank you again. I'd like to now introduce the NYPD Asian Hate Crimes Task Force. And we also have our special guest, Deputy Inspector Jessica Corey, the new commanding officer of the NYPD Hate Crime Unit, and she will be joined by Captain Jackson Chang and Lieutenant Tang Liu.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for hosting this. Thank you for having this. Just a little bit about the Asian Hate Crime Task Force. We fall under hate crimes. So everything gets filtered to them and then it gets brought to our attention afterwards. Right now, our unit consists of 1 deputy inspector, 2 captains, 2 lieutenants, 2 sergeants, and about 25 detectives. I know someone had mentioned in the chat that we are on a volunteer basis, that we are. So we could respond anywhere, anytime. As what the ADA Melinda Katz said, for the most part, don't be hesitant to report. A big factor in that is gathering the evidence. Like a lot of these surveillance videos and cameras, they do have a 30-day or 2 weeks, maybe sometimes even a shelf life before it recycles. So the faster something gets reported, our detectives can go out there and pull as much evidence as needed for prosecution reasons. And also, we will never ask, the police department will never ask about your immigration status. It does not matter to us. That question will never come up. I'm going to share, I see that you put it on the screen. We have an email and a Twitter. I'll also put it in the chat later on. And please don't hesitate to reach out. We're here for everyone. We're here for you guys. Even if something doesn't qualify to the level of a hate crime, because the penal law standard there's a certain standard to be met, we still want to hear about it and we still want it to be reported. So everyone out there, let your constituents know, please come forward. If you're hesitant, that email, if someone feels like they have to type in Chinese, Korean, or another language, that's fine as well. We will have translators and we will get back to you. Someone had mentioned about an incident in August last year. So we had the 5th Precinct Detective Squad actually went out and tried to pull video in regards to the incident in that area, and Delancey and Forsyth right in the area. However, that was like during one of the peak times of the pandemic and none of the videos were capturing anything. When we asked her, unfortunately, if she was able to look at a photo array, which if she would be able to identify the perpetrator, she couldn't. So unfortunately, we have that case closed out. However, we'll be more than willing to reach back out to her, obviously.
Great. And is the new commanding officer of NYPD, Jessica Corey, still on the line if you want to share a few words?
I am here. Can you see me?
Yes, we can see you.
Hi. So I just found out about this yesterday. I actually posted it on the NYPD Hate Crimes Twitter, and I am very happy to be here. I just want to echo so many of the things that were said when DA Katz talks about if there's a crime, even if it's not a hate crime, we want it reported. violent crime, any kind of crime, whether it's a hate crime or not, we'd like the community to come out and report it, and we will do our best to solve it and bring the perpetrators to justice. So we're going to be doing something, we're going to have like a kind of like a listening tour within the coming weeks, the 7-2 precinct, the 5th precinct, the 109 precinct. And we want to make sure that it's not just the hate crime task force, the Asian hate crime task force, but that the entire NYPD has to be available to you, and that you should feel comfortable coming forward to anyone in the New York State Police Department. I'm concerned about issues where if you're saying you call 911 and they can't get a translator, that's not supposed to happen. We're supposed to have language line. People are supposed to be able to translate. So that's something that we'll have to look at as well. And I know we have the 888 number on the screen, but I just want to really make sure that people understand if there's a crime in progress, something's just happened, we want you to call 911 is the best way to initiate a response. And that will all be recorded, you know, the actual call, the response, officers going to the scene who have body cameras and maybe can pick up something. The DA also talked about evidence, that's very important. And also, recently, Mayor de Blasio announced with the NYPD that there were additional cameras installed, Argus cameras, but we also rely on businesses to have cameras, and anybody who has any connections in the business community, if they install additional cameras on the outside of their businesses, that is so helpful to us. And as the captain mentioned, the retention of video is so important, at least 30-day, if not 60-day. Because we just had an incident where it was reported a little bit late, and then we go back to take a look at it, and the video evidence is gone, and it's very, very important. So I'm available to anybody. I want to meet with all of you, and this is my first week on the job, so I'm looking forward to having a dialogue and just assuaging some of the concerns that you have.
Great. Thank you so much, Deputy Inspector. I'm so glad that you're able to join us. And I'm sure that there's going to be questions during the question and answer portion as well. I am humbled to introduce our next guest speaker, Congresswoman Grace Meng. Grace, are you still on the line?
Yep.
Great.
Thank you so much. Thank you to every single one of you who've taken the time on a weekend to be here with all of us. Thank you especially to Pastor Mike Chan of the Chinese Christian Herald Crusades and your whole team for convening all of us. To my colleagues in government, DA Katz, Council members Chin and Koo, Senator Liu, thank you for your constant advocacy for our community as well. I don't have to tell all of you today that our AAPI community has been battling two viruses throughout this last year, a year by now. One of the coronavirus pandemic and the other of racism, bigotry, hate incidents, and hate crimes. So it's been a really tough year for our community, especially. And I know that a lot of our local community groups are on the Zoom today, and I wanted to say a special thank you. You don't always get the credit and the appreciation and the funds that you deserve. We know that, and we continue to fight for your success because you are literally on the front lines of helping those in our communities. And I just want to say I really appreciate your work. So we've all heard about the number of incidents that have been reported. There's a group, Stop AAPI Hate, which recorded over 3,000 incidents. And those are just the ones that we've heard about. We know that there are so many more that have not been reported. In New York City alone, we saw nearly 300 COVID-related hate incidents just this from February to May in just like 3 months. This was a 10-fold increase in anti-Asian hate complaints compared to the same 4 months in the previous year. And this hate is affecting, you know, every member of our community, from our kids who might be getting bullied in schools, to our elderly who are literally afraid to come out of their homes, and some have even been targeted and beaten to death. So one of the reasons last year I introduced a resolution in Congress that I thought would be a very easy and necessary way for Congress to take a bipartisan stance to condemn the bigotry and hatred that was happening towards Asian Americans. Unfortunately, not all of my colleagues voted for it. Some of them voted against it. But still, it was important, I thought, for Congress to take a stand. I was proud that President Biden last month signed this legislation into law, and also included 2 other parts of bills that I'm working on. One is to basically provide more resources for COVID, for our community in relation to COVID-19. We know from the beginning that our government at all levels was a little slow in providing sufficient resources in different languages. And so we need to continue to push. And so hopefully it will be able to provide more resources in multiple languages. Also working on something called COVID-19 Hate Crimes Bill. This is a bill that would provide greater oversight on COVID-19 related hate crimes. Specifically, it would require the Attorney General to designate an officer or employee at the DOJ to facilitate an expedited review of COVID-19 hate crimes. It would also provide issue guidance for state and local law enforcement to establish online reporting in multiple languages. And I know I've had a lot of conversations with Mayor de Blasio and his team and our hate crimes task force about making it easier for people in our community to report these incidents, whether they're actual hate crimes at the end of the day or not. They need to be reported. And someone who might be a grandma who doesn't speak English might not always be able to go to the police station. Someone who is literally on the way to work and had a racial slur thrown at them is not going to be able to take the time and to report these incidents. So the reporting at the local level is most important for us to be able to provide increased resources for these situations. I also want to thank President Biden, because yesterday, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, I know he had a sit down with many of our Asian American advocacy groups around the country, including many from our state of New York, to talk about how the White House can be more responsive and how they can provide more resources. Lastly, I just want to say it's important that we hold our leaders accountable. It's important that we have meetings like this, but it's also important that leaders beyond the Asian American community are standing up for our community and are speaking out when they are seeing these things happen. We've had a really tough year, but in some ways, it's been an opportunity this last year to expand upon the coalitions that we have been building for years. Last year, we saw many Asian Americans and many diverse people in all of our communities come out in support of the Black community during the Black Lives Matters movement. And we are thankful for many of our shared community members from other communities come out to support us. Many people have made statements. And so we need to continue to ask our brothers and sisters within and also from outside of our communities to please stand in solidarity with our Asian community. And we have to remember that the answer to racism is never more racism. It will not work. We will not find answers if we are pointing fingers at another community. We need to make sure that we are finding more ways to show solidarity and to show support for each other's issues. Lastly, I would just say, just because it's sort of like breaking news, the Senate just passed legislation that will provide much needed COVID relief to people right here in Queens. It will hopefully give us more vaccines. We know that we have not had our fair share of vaccines in our Asian community. Rochelle is definitely smiling. And we know that we haven't had enough here in the state of New York as well. So we will continue to work with our colleagues in government on this. But the bill, which hopefully will be signed sometime next week, will provide more help for small businesses, for restaurants. There's a new grant up to $5 million for restaurants. So please look out for information for that. Increased SNAP benefits for food security, increased child tax credit, survival checks of $1,400, and resources to reopen schools finally. So those are just, some top lines of what we will expect in the next, hopefully, law in the next week or so. So please don't hesitate to contact my office if we can be of help in any of this. Thank you again, Pastor Chan. This was really informative, really helpful. I've been on a lot of these. This was very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Grace, for all that information. And I'd like to just echo, we need to expand on coalitions that we have already. We need to form allyship, solidarity across communities outside of Asians. Count me in. I am going to be one of those people that will support that. So we definitely need to take action outside of this forum. Thank you. Senator John Liu did have to leave early, but he did want to extend his appreciation for this forum. And again, if you have any questions for his office, feel free to reach out to him. And next, we have a message from Senator Toby Stavisky. I believe we have it playing here. Thank you.
Today's event. Everybody has been troubled and appalled by the attacks on the Asian American community. And I'm particularly concerned about the sense of fear and anger that has come out of these attacks. And it seems to me that we've got to have more accountability from the law enforcement officials, whether it be the New York City Police Department or the District Attorney's Office. Sometimes the law enforcement personnel forget that a hate crime consists of the word hate. It's more than just a crime, and in fact, the penalties are doubled if there's a conviction, because hate has obviously no place in our society. Sometimes the district attorney in the past is reluctant to charge an individual with a hate crime under the hate crime statutes. But the laws are there, and they've got to be enforced. And I think that is really the most important way to deal with this. People have to be willing to come forward, go to the police, testify, and then the police and the DA's office, they have to do their part. And they've been, I think, overwhelmed by all of the different kinds of crimes that have been committed since the pandemic started. And secondly, I'm a former high school teacher, and we like to call this kind of situation a teachable moment, where we teach young people about respect, and we teach young people about other cultures. And I remember one of the musicals of many, many years ago, South Pacific had a song in it which said, "You've got to be taught to love and to hate." And I think that's really one of the solutions, that we teach young people that it's not acceptable to hate somebody who may be different, may speak a different language, may look different. Flushing and Queens is a very diverse community, and we welcome that diversity, and we have to protect each other. And I think that is the way we deal with a hate crime. Instead, we've got to respect each other and work toward a better future. So I wish everybody a very happy, a little late, Lunar New Year. The Year of the Rat was a bad one, but I think the upcoming year of the arts is going to be better. And hopefully we will see a reduction in crime. So again, I thank everybody, and I wish you a successful conference. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Senator, for that that video message. I'd like to quickly go into our next two speakers because we are running late. I'd like to introduce Councilmember Margaret Chin.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. And I wanted to thank you all, to my colleagues, elected colleagues, for joining, and all the community-based organization and community member, especially to Pastor Mike Chan, and also Fora from the Commission on Human Rights for suggesting this idea of this forum. We have to tackle this anti-Asian violence with a comprehensive approach through education, legislation, and community relation building. I've heard from my colleague how important it is for us to really work together and support each other. And in the city council, there's only two of us who are Asian, myself and Councilmember Koo, and we are a member of the Black, Latino, and Asian Caucus. And that's how we build a relationship. We support each other, because it's very hard to get fundings and legislation passed if it's just the two of us. And that's why the support that we build in the council is critical. And this whole xenophobia, anti-Asian, is nothing new to our community. It happens long before the pandemic, but we just seen such a huge increase. And we haven't even seen the true extent because there's been so much underreporting. And everybody's talking about how can we help our community member, especially the victims. It's so traumatic to them and to their family. How do we support them so they can come forward and report the crime and help them, with the medical bill, mental health services, so that they have the support in the long run. The other issue that I've heard, we talked earlier about, we have city agency, the Moyer, the Mayor's Office of Hate Crime, Commission on Human Rights, but they're not adequately funded. Come on. I mean, every time we have hearings and budget hearing, we ask, how much is your funding? It's not enough. I mean, even with Moya, small office. And when we talk about language access, the city still has not complied with local law 30. The whole issue of having translation, interpreter in every agency, and have that available. I mean, I am so proud of the police officers that are in my district. I have the 5th precinct, the 7th precinct, the 1st precinct, and they're very responsive to the community, especially the 5th precinct, because they have officers that are bilingual, that speaks the language. And we are working hard right now to try to find funding in the city council to support the Asian task force so that we can facilitate the work that they do. But also, I think for our community, we need to speak up. We need to show our face. We need to be visible. And in the city council, I really urge everyone to come forward at our hearing. We want to see your face. We want to hear your requests. We want to hear your suggestion. And right now, we are going through the budget process. We are having preliminary budget hearing right now. A lot of our community-based organizations, they need the funding support to do the work that they do. They can help the victim come forward. If they don't feel comfortable going to the police station, they can go to their local community-based organization that they know, they trust, to help them report the crime. But these organizations need funding. And that's why this is the time that we urge you, show up, send in testimony, send in suggestions for initiative. We welcome those. And a lot of time I speak with community-based organizations. I said, we don't see our faces out there. And like when we talk about more money for the Asian Anti-Crime Task Force, we have Public Safety Committee hearing, budget hearing. Community members should show up and say, hey, this is important for our community. We need more funding for that. Same thing with Moya. We're having a hearing on Monday on our immigration committee, and we will be advocating for more resources, because even translation, a lot of agencies do not have translator, interpreter, and materials are never in other languages to start with. A lot of information, they start with English, and we had to fight to get the other languages, and that should not be the case. So I am really happy that we can all come together with these in these forums, and we need to do more. And I know the one thing that someone talked about earlier, utilizing our ethnic media. I remember, like, I have spoken so much every time when an agency talk about doing outreach. I said, have you reach out to the ethnic media? It's a free resource, or at least pay the advertisement. And that information will get out to community who don't speak English, but they can get the information from reliable resources that they're familiar with. So I really, thank everyone for being here, but I do want to encourage you to get involved and participate during the budget process. I hope to see some of you at our budget hearing. And so this will be a very good way for us to all work together. And the last thing that I wanted to say is that building community relation, I have a very positive example. The food pantry that we started with U3 in the Lower East Side. We service public housing residents, local residents, seniors, and volunteers are so diverse from all different, ethnic, racial background. And seeing people helping each other and supporting each other, that's how we can help build relationship. And hopefully we can all work together to build a better and stronger city. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Chin, for sharing that and giving us some concrete examples of how to get involved. I'm going to ask Ian if you can just share how we can be part of that budget process and share testimonial, because I actually am not aware of how to do that, and I want to make sure that our voice is heard and represented. So thank you, Councilmember Chin. And our last speaker is Councilmember Peter Koo. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Koo. Councilmember Koo.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Councilmember Peter Koo. I represent Flushing, Queens. Thank you for having me. I'm grateful for this discussion today. We want to thank all the agencies and all my colleagues coming here to give all this valuable information. And I want to thank everyone who come together to discuss the problems with Asian hate. We need more discussions like this. We need more advocacy all year, not just when there's attack after attack. So no one forgets what can happen when we let the guard down. New York is made of people from all over the world. The diversity is our strength, is America's strength. Our local communities and their different enclaves are the modern day Ellis Island. This is where new immigrants come to live and raise their families. We have been discriminated against, assaulted, and randomly attacked so many times that it doesn't even seem unusual anymore. We need to make sure that this is not the new normal. We have to fight back against hate. We can start by providing the resources the Asian communities need to survive. We need better language access. I cannot tell you how many times my office has had to translate for different city agencies or offices. We are happy to do it, but it shouldn't be that way. Some agencies are better than others. The city needs to take this responsibility seriously. Like Councilmember Chin already said, there's a local law about this. And our Asian Hate Crime Task Force is run by volunteers. The city needs to give them the resources they need to identify these perpetrators so that they can either stop them from committing these crimes or keep them behind bars so they cannot never do it again. I'm happy to join all of you today. Thank you for coming together and to make sure our voices are heard. The last things I want to say is that we have attended many Zoom meetings and thought is cheap, right? So we need agencies, the Nypd, the DA office, and the Moya and the commission, the Human Rights Commission, to come together so that these perpetrators, they have to have consequences. The DA office, sometimes in the time of to saving time or other circumstances, they always pre-bargain down the offenses so that these alleged criminals, they are out. There are no consequences for them. They beat up somebody, they hurt some old ladies, they almost kill someone, or they kill someone. The consequences for them are very small. So we have to make sure law enforcement agencies are doing their job. To prosecute them, they always said, to the fullest extent of law. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Koo, for your remarks. It really, I'm sure everyone is on the same page with you of it's not just all talk, we need some action. So before we go into the Q&A part, I have a message from New York City Council Speaker Corey Johnson, who is not able to make it today. He wants to share how he publicly condemns the recent violent attacks in the subway and Flushing, and he and their leadership team are aware of the campaign and the momentum to stop anti-Asian hate. We have Stella Chan, the community liaison from the Speaker's office, who's here, who will be available for any questions during the question and answer part, and to also bring any suggestions made back to their office. So thank you, Stella, for joining us. Okay, so we only have a couple more minutes.
发言，我们因为时间的原因，就是说，希望你们可以有问题可以问出来。
DA Katz, this is from Chris Kwok. There were remarks.
검사님, 대답하실 수 있는 질문입니다.
On the women in
喺法拉盛嘅
with assault in third degree, a misdemeanor. We all saw the video. Is this protecting the Asian American community in these times?
Well, I would love Mr. Kwok to please, because this has been our problem. Send us any video, any recording, anything that shows that the woman who was violently attacked, there's no doubt, was done so because of her nationality. And this has been the problem, right? It's been reported that there has been slurs, right? And unfortunately in the law, if I charge assault in the second degree aggravated as a hate crime, I have to prove those elements. So, part of the reason I came on this Zoom today is to really request anyone who has information. The idea that a district attorney or the police department under charges for hate crimes, and that we don't want to write up the elements and the charge of a hate crime when it's appropriate and when we can prove it, I'll be honest with you, that is just, I've never even heard of such a thing. So in order to have a hate crime, I'm going to let Michael Brovner, I have the answer, but I do want you to hear from the expert, tell you exactly what we need. And Mr. Kwok, I ask you, please, if you have any video information, even anybody that will testify that they heard those slurs, we want them. Trust me, we want them. And after Mr. Brovner, just goes through very quickly, Michael, of the elements we need, I will request of Senator Stavisky. It is wrong that we are overwhelmed. We are not overwhelmed. We are more than happy to be here and responsive to any crimes. And those of you that know me know that I dubbed the borough the world's borough because the diversity is what makes us strong. I have been there every single step of the way for 25 years. And with all respect, if the hate crimes law needs to be changed in order to increase the amounts of times that we can charge assault 2 as a hate crime. It has to be done by the Senate and the Assembly. But you also don't want to undermine the credibility of the statute. This is a statute that is specifically written so that if you are targeted because of how you look or love or nationality or ethnic background, that there is a higher punishment for that. So I do think we have to keep that in mind. But as far as the crime in Flushing, we would love information that anyone has that would allow us to charge it as a hate crime. Michael, you want to give the criteria?
Sure, thanks, boss. Basically, in order for someone to be charged with a hate crime, they have to commit a crime. So all the elements of that crime, an assault would be with the intent to cause physical injury, causes physical injury, but they have to do it in whole or substantial part because of one of the protected classes. In this case, it would be national origin. The fact that the defendant and the victim are two different races or two different nationalities is insufficient. Just because we're able to prove that the victim was Asian and the defendant was, I think, white Hispanic, that's not enough. We have to have something that shows that the reason why this crime occurred was in whole or substantial part. If we can't reach that level beyond reasonable doubt, we can't ethically and legally charge it.
Thank you, Mr.
I will add to the person who said talk is cheap. I agree with you, talk is cheap. And at the end of the day, if we charge this as a hate crime and bring it to court, it is my professional opinion that we'll lose. And that is something that nobody wants. So I think at the end of the day, look, we are begging for information that people might have. We would like to hold people accountable for any violence, but especially those that target folks just because of their nationality. It can't be tolerated in Queens.
Yeah, we should definitely look into that specific case. It looks like that there is still some more information that could be added to that case, and I'm sure that your office will look into what Chris is writing in the chat.
Well, he's writing it in the chat. That is true.
Yeah.
So the New York Times said it.
Yeah.
We really can't talk about the investigation,
yeah.
But the New York Times said it. We need that text in order to be able to charge it. We would love to have that text.
Great. So
that's all I can say about it, but we would love to have it.
Yes. So I'd like to just bring to some more questions, and I'm hoping that it's a partnership. It's the community's responsibility. It's the DA's responsibility. We're all on the same page, everyone. We want this to be solved. We want to prevent this from happening again. So just moving along for the next question. From the beginning, we have one from Jerry. He understands that the NYPD Asian Hate Crimes Task Force is all volunteers. Why can't we have a permanent team focusing on Asian hate crime? And this is an ongoing request. It's also been mentioned in the white paper from Abney. Is there somebody that can share, why hasn't this happened yet?
So Jessica Corey here. So this is, again, my first week here, so I don't want to get too much into what policy going forward will be. But just know that when we say volunteer, these are all detectives, lieutenants, captains, inspector that are all full-time employees of the NYPD. And if we need them to do something, we can reach out and have that put into motion right away. My staff is all full-time detectives actively working on hate crimes. And we partner with the members of the Asian Hate Crime Task Force, and they're always available to us when they speak so many languages and come from so many different backgrounds. And so, the work is being done, and we are able to fully investigate any case that is possibly a bias incident and a hate crime.
Yeah, I actually personally know people from the Asian Hate Crime Task Force, and they are paid, but also out of their time of their regular 9 to 5, they are going out of their way to go to these victims and outreach and follow up with them when they know that they're not, the victims are not comfortable talking to law enforcement. So I can be a testament to that they are going really out of their way outside of their 9 to 5 to make sure that the community is getting heard. So I appreciate your first week here, and I'm glad that our voices are being heard through this forum. A next question that we have is from Rocky Chin. To the elected officials and candidates, do you support a strong and independent New York City Human Rights Commission? This could be to any elected official. If anyone wants to talk about their views about the Human Rights Commission.
I mean, I'd be happy to answer it, but it's not really my jurisdiction, right? We prosecute the crimes. You know, I do think that anytime that you have more access to communities, to any commissions that can help, I think that that's a good thing. I do think the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs and the agencies that we have are available and there for folks who need information and need help. But other than that, I think anytime you have more access, it's good. But I'm not a candidate right now, so I don't know if anybody else has an answer. I'm just trying to be helpful.
Rochelle, I just want to reiterate, it's a question of funding, resources. True. I mean, these agencies are very, very small. They need more staff to do outreach, more attorneys that could prosecute cases. And so I really encourage, come to the hearing and voice that concern.
Yes,
and Rochelle, if I can, because you know, I just want to make clear, if anybody needs something.
想要讲清楚的就是说
그것도 보고 일이 어떤
on my staff and immigration lawyers.
啱啱先邀請一個，我啱啱先聘請
to deal with prosecutions on making sure that if someone has unintended consequences like deportation or anything like that, that this lawyer looks at it with my ADAs to make sure that we don't have those unintended consequences. He also looks back at other cases where people are about to get deported, and he helps if they've asked for a lower plea bargain or something like that. In order, you know, now it's 10 years later, they're a family of 3. He's supporting his family, you know, things of that nature to review that. So we do have an immigration lawyer on staff in case anybody needs guidance on where to go for certain information, just FYI. His name is Richard LaRosa.
That should really be a regular thing for all DA offices, that there should be an immigration. It should be a normal thing that you would think in New York City we should have. But thank you.
Yeah, in Queens, we're 200 languages, 190 countries, so it's a little bit more diverse than a lot of areas. So I felt like it was absolutely needed, and we didn't want to do any prosecutions with unintended consequences. And so it's been very helpful, but he's also really great at finding different agencies that people need.
Great. And we have a question from Peter earlier in the chat. Has there been consideration for bridge building with Black and Brown community groups? Since several of these assaults are from the Black and Brown individual communities, there are some discussions with church leaders and to consider advocacy, but what else? Has anybody heard of any other instances where we can really bridge that that allyship and form that solidarity? Any other organizations that anyone is aware of?
I feel like I don't want to take over. I'm waiting for other people to answer.
Okay, go ahead, DA Katz. Let's hear if you've heard of any.
I think this is really a question, to be honest about it, for the New York City, you know, agencies. I mean, we do outreach. Michael Grosvenor, who's head of the Hate Crimes Bureau, goes all around the borough of Queens County and talks at almost any organization in every community, in the Jewish community, Black community, Hispanic community, every community, to talk about hate crimes. What we need to do in order to prevent them and how we learn how to report them. You know, so I think that outreach is being done. But I think, you know, the agencies are probably on here as well.
Rochelle, if I may intervene, my name is Kajuri Chaudhary, and I'm the Deputy Commissioner for the Community Relations Bureau at the New York City Commission on Human Rights. So my colleague Sapna was speaking, but I've been on listening. So the City Commission on Human Rights, one of our mandates is fostering intergroup relationships. Back in the 1940s, when the the genesis of our agency lies in community, in fostering and fostering intergroup relationships across the city. And we take this very seriously. And part of some of our trainings and group building communities has been exactly this. So I'll give you an example. Last year, when we were doing the bystander intervention trainings in partnership with with CAE and other community partners, one of our colleagues who work with African diaspora communities came to us and was like, you know, many of the African communities are remembering their experiences during Ebola with discrimination and bias and harassment and would like to help now. What can we do? So we created a new training specifically for folks who wanted to be an upstander or a bystander interventionist within the African communities in this space. So through remembering and fostering and building connections on shared experiences and solidarity, we are able to like build those bridges. And that's just like an example of one incident or one example in the work that we do. So that's definitely within our wheelhouse. And as Councilmember Chin has said repeatedly in this conversation, like we are a very tiny agency and we are very under-resourced. So we do our best, but our hands are also in some ways limited. Thank you.
But they do well. They do very well.
And if I can just piggyback off of what Kajori just shared, I mean, we're also a small agency. We work really hard to work deeply with communities. We're one of a handful of agencies that actually has an outreach team where we deploy staff, multilingual staff across the city to talk about important information that's coming out in terms of resources and programs. And in this space during COVID-19 and as the attacks have increased, our team has also gone out and talked to immigrant communities across the city, not just Asian communities, but all communities. And we've done a lot of extensive outreach in Asian communities specifically, sharing information, the resources that CCHR has available at our hotline. We've actually spoken to a couple of individuals who wanted to make reports of hate crimes. And so we've been able to assist either with someone who speaks their language or with an interpreter on the line, right on the spot. And so we're working hard across all city agencies to support them in their work to continue to foster and build language access across our city agencies and our websites. I know that some are better than others. We acknowledge that there's work that continues to be needed in this space, but we're working really hard with all the agencies and with folks like you on this call to continue to sort of understand and see where the gaps are and how we can continue to provide the services where those gaps exist.
Thank you so much for sharing those resources. And I just wanted to acknowledge the time. It's already 4:05. If everyone is okay, I'm going to just ask maybe 2 more questions because we did run a little late. If you need to leave, please feel free to go. We will send this recording and the resources that were all shared here because it's very overwhelming, all the information here. We will send it to you if you did sign up here with your email address. So thank you. If you're worried that you're not on the list, feel free to put on the chat your email address. Thank you. So I have a question here. It's actually a question / comment. Let me make sure I get it. From Nancy. She is Chinese American, so she has no problem with language or immigration barriers or fears. She experienced an anti-Asian hate incident in South Brooklyn that led to a dog bite. She asked someone to call NYPD for her and they ignored her and dismissed her. And when she asked if there's anything to be done to report this as a crime, as a hate crime, she reported to officers to the Civilian Complaint Board and the Internal Affairs, but fear nothing will be done. So what resources are there available in Brooklyn? Because she hears a lot of resources available in Queens.
Hi, could she reach out to me, to my office, so we can follow up with this?
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Deputy Inspector Corey. If you could just share your information on the chat and then we'll be able to make sure we follow up. Thank you.
Okay, maybe she can, maybe after you can share her information with me.
Sure.
And we can do it that way.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. Another question that we had is, and something that we want to make sure that we point out is, how do we support the victim? At the end of the day, there's still a victim that's out there from hate crime. How do we support the victims? What resources are there available? Sorry, my mom just came in telling me that I need to feed my child. But how do we support the victim in the end of the day? I contacted the mayor's office and they shared that there is NYPD, like a system that NYPD has that includes the Crime Victim Assistance Program, which is staffed by advocates from Safe Horizon, and that also is in conjunction with NYC Thrive. So there is that resources available. I want to know if there's anything out there from these agencies that know of other resources for the victim.
Anyone who is a victim of any crime in the borough of Queens County, we have a crime victim services unit. It is actually a relatively large unit. And we usually reach out directly to the victims of crimes that we know about. And we offer whatever services they may need. They may need, housing, workforce development, mental health services because of the incident, whatever it is. I mean, this is a very active unit, and a lot of victims call upon them. We also have I didn't mention it before, but I just want to mention it before we get off. We have hotlines for a lot of different things. So when you say like Safe Horizons, we also have a hotline for domestic violence. We found that domestic violence is very underreported during COVID. And so we do have a hotline for that too, 286-4410, if Elizabeth could put that in the chat. And when someone will answer the phone 24 hours a day, and they will ask you whether you want an ADA to report a crime or whether you would like a not-for-profit, usually Safe Horizon, just to get services. But seriously, if you know someone who has been involved in a crime, doesn't necessarily have to be something that was charged. We have a relatively large department to help.
Great. So now to wrap up and to summarize some of the key points, I believe that this forum is part of the process, part of the process to heal, to bring movement, to bring positive change. So we understand that the community has been in pain. Each of us are part of the community. We've seen that the harm is already done. So let's not be reactive. Let's be more proactive with our efforts here. Let's cross community lines. Let's make sure that we raise our voices and be heard, and hold more educational forums, more town halls, to make sure that those who need it the most get those resources in the language that they speak. So thank you all again for joining us, and let's hold each other accountable to keep this movement going. I again am Rochelle Ocampo from Makilala TV, and I'm so humbled to be able to be part of this forum, and for Flora and Pastor Mike for coordinating this event. There's a lot of resources out there that just shared within the past 2 hours. We will reach out and share all those resources after the event. So please put your email down if you want to get the recording of this. Thank you again, and everyone enjoy the rest of your weekend.